Let me tell you something. Jesus lived as a Jew and died as a Jew. He was a religious Jew. He was going to yeshiva. He never started Christianity. Christianity started 300 years after he died. There's different arguments how long after he passed Christianity actually started. The lowest opinion is 75 years, which is 4 or 5 generations after he died. And some opinions that it happened 300 years after he died. Therefore, he has nothing to do with Christianity. Someone comes and tells you a story about someone who lived 300 years ago, and you're supposed to believe. So all of those stories, none of them we know for sure if they're reliable or not. We don't even know if he existed.
Most of the claims that Rabbi Mizrachi uses in this argument are completely false. Firstly, Jesus was indeed a first-century Jew. And no serious historian disputes this. He was born to Jewish parents, he was circumcised, observed Jewish customs, taught in synagogues and the temple, debated Torah with the other Jews, and was executed under Roman authority in Judea. Christian sources and secular scholarship agree on this. This claim does not undermine Christianity because it is foundational to it. Christianity understands itself as the fulfillment of Jewish scripture and the messianic hopes within Second Temple Judaism, not as a complete rupture from it. The rest of the claims, however, collapse under the historical evidence accepted by the overwhelming majority of scholars, including atheists and agnostic ones. In the debate, Rabbi Mizrachi says that we have no proof that Jesus ever existed. This is false and is rejected by virtually every qualified historian of antiquity. Atheist New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman has repeatedly stated that Jesus' existence is not seriously disputed in the Academy. He writes, "The idea that Jesus did not exist is a modern notion. It has no ancient precedence. Of the thousands of early Christianity scholars who did teach at such schools, none of them, to my knowledge, has any doubts that Jesus existed. This is the view of virtually every expert on the planet."
It's hard to imagine that you'd have all of these independent sources saying basically similar things about what Jesus said and did if there wasn't a Jesus. Paul actually knows Jesus' brother James. And there is no question he's talking about his earthly brother James, and he knows Peter. If Jesus didn't exist, you'd think his brother would know it.
Ehrman wrote an entire book titled Did Jesus Exist?, specifically to refute mythicism. He notes that Jesus is better attested in first-century sources than most other Palestinian Jews of the period, aside from figures like Josephus. Even non-Christian sources from the late 1st and early 2nd centuries mention Jesus. Flavius Josephus writes in the Antiquities of the Jews 2 references, one to James, the brother of Jesus who is called Christ, quoted, and the Testimonium Flavonium describing Jesus as a wise teacher crucified under Pilate, whose followers continued. Tacitus reports that Christus suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and that the superstition started in Judea and spread to Rome. Pliny the Younger writes in a letter to Trajan, describes Christians singing hymns to Christ as to a god. Suetonius mentions disturbances among Jews in Rome at the instigation of Chrestus, a common misspelling of Christ. These are neutral sources, not Christian propaganda. The scholarly consensus is that a historical Jesus of Nazareth lived, taught, attracted followers, and was crucified under Pontius Pilate around 30 to 33 AD. Mythicism remains a fringe position with no standing in mainstream historical scholarship. Rabbi Mizrachi also mentions in the debate that Jesus never started Christianity, or he had nothing to do with Christianity. Jesus did not found a separate institutional church with cathedrals and creeds during his lifetime. The movement began as a Jewish messianic renewal group centered on him. But he is the origin of the movement that became Christianity. His teachings, death, and the belief in his resurrection among his Jewish followers, the apostle, James, his brother, and others, created the community. Remember, we as Christians believe that the first church was started by Jesus, the church that has no walls, no roof, the spiritual church. Within years of his death, the community was proclaiming him as the risen Messiah and Lord. Paul's letters, some of the earliest surviving Christian documents, written within 50 AD, only about 20 years after the crucifixion, already treat Jesus as the central figure. Quote, early creedal material e.g. 1 Corinthians 15:3-7, which Paul says he received, and show a movement that include both Jewish and Gentile believers who are distinct from mainstream Judaism on the key issues of Jesus' identity and the inclusion of Gentiles without full Torah observance. Scholars across the spectrum recognize that the Jesus movement began immediately after his death as a Jewish sect that rapidly developed distinctive beliefs centered on him. Saying he has nothing to do with Christianity is like saying Muhammad has nothing to do with Islam or the Buddha has nothing to do with Buddhism. The historical continuity is direct. The rabbi also says that Christianity started 300 years after he died, or that the earliest claims say that it started 75 years after. Both numbers are wrong. Jesus died from around 30 to 33 AD. The earliest Christian writings date to roughly 48 to 58 AD, around 25 to as early as 15 years after the crucifixion. These already presupposed community of Christians shared beliefs about Jesus' death and resurrection, baptism, the Lord's Supper, and missionary activity. The Gospels are later literary products of the same movement, not its beginning. Acts and the other early sources describe the movement beginning in Jerusalem weeks after Jesus' death and spreading rapidly at Pentecost. By the early 2nd century, we have people like Pliny, Tacitus, and other treating Christians as an established group whose founder was executed under Pilate. The claim of a 300-year delay confuses the origin of the movement with its later legalization and institutional elevation under Constantine. Constantine did not invent Christianity. He found an already widespread organized religion with bishops, scriptures, liturgy, and martyrs, and ended the persecutions against it. The idea that Christianity started in the 4th century is a popular myth with no support among historians. So no, Rabbi. Yes, Jesus was a Jew, but the movement that became Christianity began with his Jewish followers in the years immediately following his death. The claim that he has nothing to do with it, or that the religion only appeared generations or centuries later, is simply not supported by the evidence.